So let's now split up our app.js file into multiple component files. And this will just be a very simple exercise of taking each of these components and placing them into their own file. So you can even do that on your own if you want. But anyway, let's just grab this code here, cut it, and then create a new file inside source. So inside this source folder, create logo.js, which is the name of this component, right? All right. But now, of course, we also have to export this function from here. And remember that in JavaScript, we can export in two ways. So we can have named exports, which would simply be this. So with this, we would create an export called logo, which we would then have to import with exactly that name into the other file. So into the file where we need it. But usually in React apps, what we do is to use a default export. So export default, just like this. And then of course, now if we try to reload this, we will get an error that, well, not this one, yeah, right here. So we see that the logo is not defined. And so of course, that's because now we have to import it right here. So import, and here actually we can use any name that we want. So because we used a default export. But of course, we will still call it logo here. So import logo from, and then simply the path to that file. And yes. And again, we could indeed change the name here to X, for example, and then here as well. Give it a save, and you see that it still works. But again, this is of course not advisable. This is just to show you how named and how default exports work. All right. Now let's take the next one. And by the way, the first one here will of course stay in this file because it is called app, and this file is also already called app.js. So let's grab the next one here. Okay, cut it, new file, form.js, paste it here, and then again, export default. Coming back here, then we need to import form from, just like this. Now here we will still get an error because we haven't imported useState in that other component. So let's quickly grab this line of code here, move into the form, which is where we are using useState, and then we also need to import that hook, so this useState function, here into this file. Of course, because this file here does use that function. So it's not enough to just include it one time anywhere in the code. You really have to include the parts of React that you need in each single component file. So let's close this one and this one. And now that we have done it 2 times manually, it's actually time to do it automatically. So let's again select all of this. We can even click this triangle here to collapse the function. And so then we can select all of it and then right click here and then click on refactor. And so now here, this gives us the option to move this function into a new file. So let's click that. And you see that a brand new file with the name of packing list was created. So VS Code automatically took this function here and then created a new file with this exact same name. And it also automatically imported all the parts that we need inside this function. So we have useState and we also have item. Well, this actually doesn't make a lot of sense at this point because the item is still here. So that's actually not ideal, but we will fix that in a moment. So what matters here for now is that VS Code automatically created this new file, placed this new component here, and also exported it. Now it's actually using a named export. So you can see here that it's importing it in this other way. So this is how you do a named import. But again, we usually in React development do default exports. But of course, the other way is also perfectly fine. So I'll just change it here. Export default. And then here I need to change the way I import it. So getting rid of these curly braces. And now let's also create a new component for this item here. So let's just remove this export. Select everything, refactor, and move to a new file. So again, item was created. And here we need to actually write export default, give it a save. And now we need to change that in the packing list, because now this component is no longer in app, but inside of item.js. And it's again a default export. So we need to import it basically as a default import. All right, so this small thing here happened because we first exported the packing list which depended on the item. But yeah, in any case, usually we do this immediately. So usually when we build some app, we do immediately create a new file for when we need a new component. So let's do that one final time. So stats, let's change it again to export default just to stay consistent. And then fix it here as well. And with this, we now have one component per file, which makes our component here a little bit easier to manage. So then there's not so much scrolling up and down, but instead, well, we can develop basically each component in isolation in its separate file. Now, taking it one step further, we can also move each of the components into a new components folder. So components, and then let's select all of them actually. So everything except for index.js, which is not a component, and our CSS file. Grab them here, and now we only have one problem, which is the app file cannot be found here in index.js. So here we need to now fix this path to components/app. And with this, we are finished. So all the other files still work the same, or actually this one here. So here the imports still work because all the components are still in the same folder as app.js. And with this, we actually finished this project. So once again, congratulations for finishing your first, a bit more real React project. So a project that actually does something. So I think this was a really great practice project, quite straightforward, but it had all the most important fundamentals that you needed to know at this stage. Now, of course, this is not a real-world application, but in large-scale apps, you actually have many smaller parts in which you will need exactly these skills. And so everything that you are learning here is really, really important. It will lay the foundation so that later you can build those large and real-world applications. Now, next up in the section, we have a nice exercise where together we're going to build an accordion component. And then I just want to show you one other very important part of React. So that's going to be the children prop. And so, yeah, stay tuned for that.